Happy New Year's Eve, everybody, and it is time for another top 25 list for 2020, but maybe not the kind that you're thinking of. Stay tuned. Hey everybody, I'm Ken and welcome back to my channel, Mid-Level Media. And you know, 2020 has been an amazing year. Maybe not for new films, but definitely for physical media releases. Check out my top 50 new Blu-rays and 4Ks, that video that I just dropped yesterday. But today, I'm coming at you with a video that I don't think a lot of people are going to be doing this year. You're seeing a lot of lists right now, the top 10 movies of 2020, the top 10 worst movies of 2020, the top 10 surprises of 2020. You're seeing a lot of those type of lists, and I most certainly might at some point make those, probably in January when I've seen everything that I want to see. But today, you know, I watched a lot of movies for the first time, a lot of classic films, a lot of modern classic films from the 90s, early 2000s. Even as recent as 5 years ago, films that I haven't seen. So I played a lot of catch up in 2020. There wasn't a lot of new movies that came out. You know, theaters were closed down. We had to rely on streaming only, and I didn't want to watch like all the new straight to VOD releases every single week. It just didn't seem as exciting. But what I did get excited about in 2020 was going back and revisiting these older classics that I had never seen, expanding my knowledge of film, digging back into the history of film. That's what I got most excited about in 2020, and I'm here today to share with you some of these first-time watches in a ranking order. I'm going to give you my top 25. So just to give you a little context, I watched 62 films for the first time this year. I think that number is correct. At least that's as many as I documented on either Letterboxd or Instagram when I did my reviews. It could have been more. Some could have slipped through the cracks here and there, but 62 new first-time watches in 2020, and I'm going to highlight my top 25. So basically, any film that is not a 2019 release or a 2020 release, because I was still catching up on 2019 films at the beginning of 2020, so there would be a lot of those. I'm not classifying 2019 or 2020 releases on this list, but if it's in 2018, 2017, 2016, 2-3 years back, I'll include those in the list. I don't even think I really have any of those in my top 25. But before I get into it, guys, if you enjoy content like this, physical media-based content, movie-based content, go ahead and consider hitting that subscribe button for more great content on this channel. I put videos out weekly, almost daily it seems like at this point. And be sure to like this video, guys. Every single like will help these videos. I don't think you guys understand just how much a simple like can help me out with this video and help out this channel. I would definitely appreciate you hitting that like button right there, and also comment down below. I know a lot of people checked out older films for the first time this year. The first time watch YouTube video is like a huge thing right now on social media, on YouTube, TikTok, all the social medias. Everybody's doing their first time watches and reactions to like old classic films, and everybody's like, I can't believe you've never seen that before. You're gonna say that a few times on my list as well. But the first time watches have been a big deal in 2020, and I really think it's because there just hasn't been a lot that's come out. But so be sure to comment down below your top 5 new films that you saw this year for the first time, the best film that you saw this year for the first time that came out, like a classic film. Leave that in the comments below. That kind of stuff just really interests me. So yeah, leave that in the comments below and let's talk about it. So let's go ahead and get into this list, guys. Coming in at number 25, guys, is a film starring Michael Douglas and Glenn Close. It came out in 1987. It is a thriller called Fatal Attraction. And, you know, this wasn't honestly like the best as far as like narratively, structurally, the best film on this list, but I did enjoy it. Glenn Close does give a completely unhinged performance. Michael Douglas is really good as well. It goes to some pretty wacky, batshit places by the end of it, and it is a film that I quite enjoyed. It was a part of that Paramount Presents line. It was number 1 on that list. I covered it yesterday in my top 50 Blu-rays and 4Ks of the year. This is a film that I enjoyed. This is a film that was good enough to crack my top 25 first-time watches. So let's move on to 24, guys. And at 24 is a classic. And I revisited a lot of films from 1931 this year. Don't ask me why. It was a year that I zeroed in on. I had it in my head I was going to watch like 10 films from every single year, starting with 1931. This is a classic Universal monster film. This is the first Universal monster film, and it is Dracula from 1931, starring Bela Lugosi. And this was a good movie. I enjoyed it. It was a little cheesy compared to like modern standards, but it was good. It had some good atmosphere. It had a great Dracula performance. The template for all Dracula performances going forward rested on Bela Lugosi's shoulder, and I thought he did a fantastic job bringing this character to life and bringing it into the American mythos. So Dracula from 1931 is my number 24 as far as first time watches. Let's move on to 23, guys, and this is where we might get a little controversial. So I know a lot of people love this movie. A lot of people hold this up as one of the grandest sci-fi cinematic masterpieces of all time. I've talked about it before on this channel a little bit, but on my Instagram as well when I did my month of Kubrick on my Instagram page, Mid-Level Movie Reviews, which if you're not following me there, go ahead and hit the link in the bio and start following me on my Instagram page for more movie reviews and movie related content. But 2001: A Space Odyssey is my number 23. I did enjoy this film on a technical level. It is one of the best directed films that I have ever seen in my life. Stanley Kubrick behind that camera, there is literally nobody else like him. And the fact that he covered all of these different types of genres and really influenced all of these filmmakers like Spielberg, like Lucas, moving forward in their careers. Even Denis Villeneuve drew some inspiration from Stanley Kubrick. This is a very well put together movie, technically brilliant, perfect. I just couldn't engage with it on any kind of story level, any kind of performance level. The best character in this movie is a robot. He's only in it for like 20 minutes, and it just wasn't the best movie to me. And to be honest, it was a little bit overhyped. I had a little bit too high of expectations, I believe, going into it, but I did enjoy the movie enough to put it on my top 25. It's just at the lower end. So that's 23 is 2001: A Space Odyssey. So don't hurt me, but let me know in the comments below what you think of that film. Do you think 2001 is a little overrated? Be sure to let me know in the comments. So let's move on to our number 22, guys. And that is Sunset Boulevard. And some of these movies I'm going to go into, I have the physical media copies for, so I'm going to show them off here and there as we go along. A lot of them I already showed off yesterday because surprise, surprise, the ones that I bought in 2020 as far as new physical media releases are the ones that I watched for the first time as well. It kind of goes hand in hand. But these were movies that I bought at the beginning of the year because I was going to try to do, actually I did an Oscar series on my Instagram page where I went back and tried to watch as many classic films before the Oscars, movies that were either nominated or won Best Picture, either one. I actually have a video, if you go all the way back in my YouTube career, right at the beginning of 2020, where I reviewed this film, Sunset Boulevard, and another one that I'm getting ready to talk about. But Sunset Boulevard, starring Gloria Swanson, William Holden. This is a classic movie that a lot of people hold up as one of the greatest of all time. I enjoyed it, mostly for Gloria Swanson's performance. She is fantastic in this movie. The movie itself didn't resonate with me completely as far as the story went. I thought it drug a little bit. It's a very long movie. It's like 2.5 hours long. It does recapture that old Hollywood feel perfectly for this time. You know, it's set in Los Angeles. It's a good movie. It's a great movie. It's just not one that I particularly enjoyed all that much. So it is at number 22 is Sunset Boulevard. So let's move on to my next one, guys. And it is another Stanley Kubrick film. That is The Killing from 1956. This is probably what I would say is his first full-length feature film. This is a very enjoyable film. It's like a heist film. It has a great cast in it, a great cast of people that aren't huge stars, so there are some recognizable faces that do show up in later Kubrick films. So I did enjoy this film quite a bit did I enjoy this film. So it ended up at my number 21. So going at my number 20, guys, this is where we hit some, we're hitting some comedies here in the next couple, but this is Friday. The film starring Ice Cube and Chris Tucker from, I believe, 1990 is when this film came out. I could be wrong. Could have been a little bit later, but I know it was the 90s. I know it was the early 90s. This is one that I never saw, but always heard about growing up. Of course, I love Chris Tucker from the Rush Hour movies, Money Talks, like that. I used to watch him all the time when I was a kid in those older movies, but I never got around to seeing Friday. Classic comedy. I laughed consistently like all the way through this movie. It's not like the most technically brilliant film on this list, but I thought it was hilarious. I thought it was a movie that when I watched it, I was like, geez, I've been missing out on this movie my entire life, and I have no idea why, because the comedy is like one of my favorite genres. This movie is absolutely hilarious, and that's why it comes in at my number 20. So moving on to 19, guys, is another comedy, but also kind of a coming-of-age film, directed by John Hughes. I saw a couple of John Hughes movies for the first time this year. The other one didn't end up on my list, but this is Ferris Bueller's Day Off, and another one that I have no idea how I went my entire life without seeing this movie. It's a completely fantastic, enjoyable, coming-of-age movie starring Matthew Broderick, a very, very young Matthew Broderick, who's absolutely great in this movie. It's just a fun teenage romp. Teenagers being teenagers. They're cutting class. They're skipping school. They're getting into mischievous behavior. And it's a complete blast the entire time. Matthew Broderick as Ferris Bueller is one of the most charming on-screen characters, teen characters of all time. And it's just a great movie that I can't believe that I've just now seen for the first time this year. So let's move on to number 18, guys. And we are getting to another Kubrick film. I watched a lot of Stanley Kubrick films for the first time this year. Dr. Strangelove at number 18. This is another type of comedy, but this is more of like a satire, like a political satire, also wartime satire, that I thought was completely brilliant for the time. It's a movie that's so incredibly relevant today, especially considering all the stuff that we're going through as far as like overseas war and politics and all of that stuff. It kind of blends it with the comedy, with the political satire so seamlessly and so incredibly well. I thought it's a brilliant film. It's an incredibly smart film. And this is what I'm talking about as far as like Stanley Kubrick. He is so good at tackling like all of these different types of film genres, and he's just the master of the trade. Even though I don't always love every single one of his movies, you can't deny that this dude is like the influencer of like all influencers as far as filmmaking goes, because this is like a spoof movie. This is like a satire, and there's no doubt in my mind that this inspired films like Airplane, like Naked Gun, like all of those great spoofs of the 80s and 90s. Yeah, Dr. Strangelove is a fantastic film. Number 17, guys, is a film that might throw a few of you guys for a loop, especially considering all of the classic films that I have covered so far. You're gonna be like, you're putting that in front of 2001: A Space Odyssey? Well, yes, I am, because this movie right here is called Night School. This is from, I believe, 1980, and this is one of the best slasher movies that I've ever seen, and it came out of nowhere. This was sent to me by Warner Archive to review. I just kind of put it on my review list on a whim and said, that movie looks kind of cool. This cover looks completely basic and generic. This movie blew my mind as far as like slasher films and what it did and what it accomplishes. I'm not going to reveal anything about the movie because there are some surprises. There are some twists and turns that you do not expect in this film. All I can say is it's one of the best slasher movies ever made. I absolutely love this movie. I'm definitely going to be watching it again. This is going to grow on my list of best horror movies of all time, certainly best slasher movies of all time. If you have not seen Night School, I absolutely recommend it, and I can guarantee you that most of you have no idea what this movie is, and that's why I think it's so cool that I'm able to talk about it with you guys right now, and that I enjoyed so much. Definitely check out Night School, and if you can, buy it from Warner Archive. Fantastic physical media-based company. All right, guys, so let's go on to my number 16, and this is a Francis Ford Coppola film, and it's not one of the Godfather films, even though I still need to see Godfather Part 2. If you believe it or not, I haven't seen that film. Maybe that'll be a first-time watch in 2021, but I've seen the original Godfather, just not Part 2. Number 16, guys, is Apocalypse Now. So I bought the 4K of Apocalypse Now, which I actually have behind me down there, but I'm not going to reach for it because I don't want to interrupt the video again. But it is Apocalypse Now, and this is a really great Vietnam War film that goes in some very different, deep, dark, psychological places. In particular, in the last 30 minutes of this film, it's got Martin Sheen in it. It's got Marlon Brando in it. Marlon Brando plays a complete insane psychopath, maniacal kind of war native tribal leader, and it's completely batshit insane by the time it gets to those last 30 minutes, and Martin Sheen's like in the lake and he's like peeking up, and it's like a battle of wits between him and Marlon Brando. But yeah, this is a great film, visually fantastic. It's just one of the best looking movies ever made, one of the best directed films ever made. I'm not going to say it's like one of my all-time favorites, like I'm going to hold it up here as far as war films, but it's a really great movie. Let's move on to number 15, guys, and I'm going all the way back to 1931 again, because you remember when I said I watched a lot of 1931 movies this year. We are going to be talking about City Lights. Now, this is a Charlie Chaplin film. written by Charlie Chaplin, directed by Charlie Chaplin, starring Charlie Chaplin. And what is interesting about this film, besides the fact that it's just a great one of the greatest romantic comedies of all time, it is a silent film at the end of the silent film era. So around this time, a lot of people were coming out with films that they called the talkies, the films that they started talking in. People were getting away from silent film. And Charlie Chaplin said, no, I don't believe that talking in movies is the future of movies. Just think about that for a second. Just let that sink in. He says that I don't believe talking in films is the future of movies. He believed that the silent film was the definitive format of film. That was the best way to get your point across, get your messages out there. In a lot of ways, if I'm going off of this film, he might have been right. I don't know, because this is a brilliant film. I got every single ounce of emotion that I needed to be able to understand the story and what was going on between these two characters, this romance that was developing between the two of them. And yeah, this is just a fantastic film. So well directed, and I had never seen a Charlie Chaplin film. I want to check out more of his filmography in 2021. Definitely one I'm going to catch up on because I hear he's got a lot of great films. But City Lights, to me, right now is his best because it's the only one I've seen. Moving on to number 14, guys, we have another Kubrick film. Surprise, surprise. I told you I checked out a lot of Kubrick this year for the first time, and that is Paths of Glory. So I have realized something about myself over this past year with watching 1917, with loving the first Wonder Woman movie as much as I do, with loving this movie. I think I like World War I movies. I think I like that aesthetic, that type of movie, more than I do World War II movies, because this is one of my favorite war films of all time. Might be my number 2 behind 1917. I love this movie. This movie is awesome. It makes me want to go back and watch All Quiet on the Western Front because that's another classic World War I film from 1930. Hopefully I'll be able to check that out in 2021. But this is a great film. This is a great performance by Kirk Douglas, Michael Douglas's father. And yeah, this is, to me, it's one of the best war films ever made. But the thing about this movie is it's only really a war film for like 20 minutes, and then you go into this whole courtroom drama and all these themes and messages of what it means to be a soldier of war versus what it means to be a coward and run away. Which one is right? Which one is better for the overall team, for the overall end goal as far as war? And it brings in some extremely interesting ideas and themes, and I really enjoyed this movie. So let's go on to number 13, guys. Now this is a classic gangster film from, I believe, 1991. This is Boys in the Hood, another film starring Ice Cube and Cuba Gooding Jr. This is a film that I've never seen before, always heard about growing up, but never watched it. This is a very powerful film about race, about social class, about what it's like growing up in the hood environment, and I found it to be extremely powerful. And yeah, it's one of the best movies I've ever seen. It's one of the best movies I've seen this year. Very powerful film. I love Boys in the Hood. It's a great film. Let's go on to number 12, a movie that's completely different than Boys in the Hood, and that is American Psycho. And I'm cheating just a little bit with this one because I know that I have seen this movie before, but I had not seen it for 20 years, and I barely remembered the film, so I'm counting it as a first-time watch. And I really love this movie. To me, this is Christian Bale's best performance ever. I think it's better than Batman. I think it's better than Ford v Ferrari. I think it's better than anything he's done in his entire career. American Psycho. He's just so freaking good in this movie. It's a completely insane movie about a sociopath who may or may not be murdering people. I don't know. You find out at the end, spoiler alert, but it may all be in his head. Who knows? But this is a fantastic movie. If you've never seen it, definitely check it out. I highly recommend it. Moving on to number 11, guys, is a movie that is in 1931, and it's one that kind of blew my mind because I couldn't even imagine before seeing this film that they were making movies like this 90 years ago. It's completely insane. This is a movie about a child murderer and a bunch of townspeople that want to capture him and bring him to justice, and this movie is called M. This is directed by Fritz Lang, and if you don't know who he is, he's a classic director, classic German director. This is a German film in subtitles as well. That directed what a lot of people are saying is the first science fiction film with Metropolis that created the first on-screen robot. So this is a very notable classic film director, and yeah, this movie really blew my mind. I absolutely loved it. Peter Lorre, his performance, he's not in it a whole lot, but he's in it like the last 20 minutes a lot. His performance just in those last 20 minutes, so freaking good. And yeah, I absolutely love this film. It was a movie that I couldn't believe that it had been made 90 years ago when I watched it, and it's absolutely mind-blowing. Definitely check out M if you can. And that is one of the reasons why I really kind of fell in love with HBO Max this year, because they have all of these classic films on HBO Max just at your disposal to watch. I don't know if M is still on there. I don't know if City Lights is still on there, but I watched both of those on there. That's where I discovered them both for the first time. So yeah, definitely recommend HBO Max and their Turner Classic Collection, because they have a lot of these classics from back in the day. And to me, to understand what is going on in the film landscape today, even 10 years ago, 20 years ago, you have to understand where it all came from. And a lot of the ideas that come out today that you think is so smart and so innovative and so creative was made like 90 years ago with all of these classic films. So there you go. Let's get into number 10, guys. And this is another movie that is highly influential for the film landscape. I just did kind of a biopic on it with Mank. And of course, I reviewed Mank on this channel, which you should definitely check out that review if you haven't already. This is Citizen Kane. And a lot of people say that this is one of the best movies ever made. A lot of people say this is the best movie ever made. This is the gold standard when it comes to cinema. And it's not my favorite movie ever made, but I will say I did give it a 10 out of 10 when I reviewed it. It is one of the best films ever made. It's one of the most well-directed films ever made. It's one of the most well-directed and performed and written films ever made. And yeah, it's absolutely phenomenal. It's Citizen Kane. It lived up to the hype for me. I know for a lot of people it doesn't, but when you take into account just the shots it showed off in this, the story, the performance by Orson Welles, I absolutely love Citizen Kane, so I gave it a 10 out of 10. I think it's a perfect movie, and it is number 10 on my first time watch list. So let's get into my number 9, guys. And this is another movie that kind of blew my mind just in terms of how well it was directed, how well it was performed. This is an actor that I've been watching for a long time, but I've never seen this movie, a movie that a lot of people would consider his definitive work in his filmography, and that is Malcolm X, starring Denzel Washington, directed by Spike Lee. This is my favorite Spike Lee film. It edges out Do the Right Thing for me. Malcolm X, this is my second favorite Denzel performance. I still love Fences just a little bit more than Malcolm X, but this is like a tour de force performance. This is Denzel Washington doing his thing in his prime for 3 hours straight, and this is a fantastic film that I just could not leave out of my number 9. It does drag a little bit because it is 3 hours. I don't think it needed to be 3 hours. They could have maybe cut it down to a half hour, but it tells a full story of this man's life, and it is endlessly fascinating, intriguing, and yeah, it just hits home on so many levels between how things had played out in American history, you know, concerning social, cultural, race wars, and it's just a great movie. So moving on to number 8, guys, is an Alfred Hitchcock film, and this isn't the last time that we'll talk about Hitchcock, and he's a director that I definitely want to dive more deeply into his filmography in 2021, but Vertigo, part of that Alfred Hitchcock collection set. This movie is fantastic, starring James Stewart. It is one of the most visually stunning films I've ever seen in my life. This film looked absolutely spectacular and amazing in 4K, as I covered yesterday in my top 5 in my top 50 physical media releases of the year. Absolutely love this film, but this was not my favorite first time Hitchcock watch this year, which we'll cover here in a second. Number 7, guys, another Stanley Kubrick film. We have A Clockwork Orange, and this is one of the most deranged, disturbing, effed up movies that I have ever seen in my life, and I absolutely love this movie. This is a movie that before I watched it, going into it, a lot of people were telling me, you're either gonna love it or you're gonna hate it. It's an extremely divisive movie, and I was locked into this movie the whole time, on board for the journey of Malcolm McDowell's character. Absolutely loved it from beginning to end. It portrayed this completely deranged alternate universe dystopian environment, and yeah, I was completely here for it. It was completely amazing. Loved The Clockwork Orange. So let's move on to number 6, guys. In number 6, we are getting to our next Alfred Hitchcock movie, and that is To Catch a Thief, starring Cary Grant and Grace Kelly. And I thought they were absolutely irresistible as a couple right there. Just look at those two on the cover. That's just a handsome, beautiful couple right there on the cover. I found Grace Kelly to be absolutely mesmerizing. Her beauty is absolutely unmatched, and I thought it was just a really fun kind of cat and mouse type mystery. It was just so well shot and so well directed by Alfred Hitchcock. The scenery, the French Riviera, just everything looked fantastic in this movie, and that is why To Catch a Thief is my number 6. But right now, guys, we are getting into my top 5 favorite first-time watches of 2020. And before I continue on, I want to remind you guys that if you have not yet become a subscriber of the Mid-Level Media channel, go ahead and hit that subscribe button for more great content. Go ahead and like this video if you haven't yet. If you haven't liked this video, hit that like button right now. And also comment down below what are some of your favorite first-time watches for 2020. So let's get into it, guys. Number 5. This is the last Stanley Kubrick film that I'm going to discuss on this list, I promise, but that is Full Metal Jacket. That is my favorite Kubrick first-time watch this year. I saw a little bit of this movie when I was a kid, but again, like American Psycho, it had been so long, and this was like a first-time watch for me. R. Lee Ermey is absolutely fantastic in this movie. I can only compare him to J.K. Simmons in Whiplash, which he absolutely took inspiration from R. Lee Ermey in this movie. This is really like two types of movies. You have the kind of boot camp setup with R. Lee Ermey and Vincent D'Onofrio in this first half, with him training them and him being really brutal to them, and he's building them up into men, and that's probably my favorite part of the movie. But then you go into this really great, fantastic Vietnam War, and all of these great war sequences and all these great sequences of destruction and disaster and death and shootouts, and it's completely awesome all the way through. Absolutely love this movie. It is my second favorite Kubrick film now behind The Shining. That is Full Metal Jacket. Let's get into my number 4, guys. This is a movie that, for my money, probably has the best street shootout scene in any movie I've ever seen in my entire life. Maybe the best shootout scene, heist scene in any movie ever, and that is Heat. This movie is starring Robert De Niro, Al Pacino, Val Kilmer. This is a movie I always heard about growing up, but never got to actually sit down and watch. It's another very long film. It's almost about 3 hours. Completely brilliant film. Even taking the shootout out, just this whole story of Robert De Niro, of Al Pacino, him being the cop, Robert De Niro being the con artist, the burglar, the guy that's trying to perform the heist, the cat and mouse game between him and Pacino through the whole movie. It's so awesome. It's so tense. It's so well acted. And yeah, like I said, that street shootout scene, guys, man, it's just like, oh, God, it was so freaking good. But yeah, I loved Heat. That is my number 4. Number 3, guys, is a movie from 2011. So I'm going a little bit more recent now. This is a film starring Joel Edgerton and Tom Hardy. That is Warrior. I have heard good things about Warrior for a long time now. I was not prepared for how this film was going to actually hit me. Back when the UFC was at the height of its popularity. And yeah, this movie is just so freaking good. Nick Nolte, who did an awesome job recently in The Mandalorian, turns in maybe the best performance of his entire career. It just, that whole scene with him and Tom Hardy in the hotel room hits me so hard, brought tears to my eyes. Yeah, I just love this movie. It gets a little bit corny towards the end in certain spots, but it was just so well done. It was almost like a modern day Rocky to me. And yeah, it's just one of the best sports MMA, boxing movies ever made. Absolutely love Warrior. That's my number 3. Number 2, guys, and we're getting into some really, really strong stuff right here with my last 2, and some real surprises. But Seven. Believe it or not, I had never seen the movie Seven with Brad Pitt, Morgan Freeman, directed by David Fincher, before this year. And I thought to myself, you know, I've owned the Blu-ray for like 3 years. And I thought to myself, I really need to actually sit down and watch this movie. Heard all kinds of great things about it. I already knew the ending. I knew the twist at the end. I knew exactly what happened, and still it hit me like a ton of bricks when it happened. And when it was just the way that Brad Pitt performed the scene, the way Morgan Freeman performed the scene, the visual, how they showed what was in the box without really showing what was in the box, but then you knew what was in the box. It was just so well done, and I absolutely love Seven. The whole movie itself is awesome, but that ending just put the cherry on top to put it at my number 2. But all the greatness of Seven, it was not strong enough to be my number 1, because one movie at number 1 just kind of hit me really close to my heart. And I really love this movie. I really love this lead actor in this movie. And he gave such a different performance than anything I had ever seen out of his entire career. This movie is directed by James Mangold, who is the director of Logan, who is the director of Ford v Ferrari. That is what most people know him now. But back in 1997, he made this little cop drama called Copland. And this movie, to me, is like a Scorsese movie, but I actually like it better than almost every Scorsese movie that I've ever seen. So James Mangold, I think, was trying to pay tribute to the old Scorsese films with this movie. He actually did a better job. He beat him at his own game with this movie. I love this movie. It's even got all the Scorsese actors in it. Ray Liotta's in it. You got Robert De Niro in it. You got Harvey Keitel. So all of these Scorsese actors are in this film with Sylvester Stallone, who gives the best performance of his entire career. I love him as Rocky. This is his best performance. This is his best movie. This is one of the best movies I've ever seen in my life. One of the best cop dramas I've ever seen. And I don't think a lot of people talk about Copland, and they really should when they're talking about classic films, because everybody holds Scorsese up as this master of cinema. In my opinion, James Mangold beat him with this movie. Almost every movie he did. I think this movie's better than Goodfellas. I think that this movie is better than Mean Streets. I think it's better than Taxi Driver. And I love Taxi Driver. I think Copland's better than Taxi Driver. I love it. But with that, guys, that is my top 25 first-time watches of 2020. I hope you enjoyed this list. It was a little bit different. I don't think that a lot of people are doing lists like this, so it was cool to kind of do something different. I'm definitely going to be doing my top 10 movies of 2020, probably my top 10 worst movies of 2020, because there was a lot of bad movies that came out in 2020. But yeah, guys, we're going to go ahead and end this video. Like always, if you're new to the channel, definitely consider hitting that subscribe button for more movie, physical media related content like this. I would definitely appreciate it. Also, give this video a like, comment down below what your favorite first-time watch was in 2020, and we'll see you next time.